Call to order. So first item, as usual, would be approval of minutes. I don't know if anybody, if you need a moment, if anybody has any comments.
I'll move it be accepted.
Second. All in favor? We're good?
Aye.
All right, minutes, done. Okay, so let's go right to the rainfall water report.
All right. Okay. Well, I have it here. What did I do? Right now I don't have numbers for February yet, except for one well, and that would be the Goat Hill well. Of the 7 sites, Goat Hill is the only one that's working right now. They're here on the island today and tomorrow. Whether they'll be here tomorrow, I guess depends on the weather. They have put together an apparatus to waterproof the sending unit. And that is, it doesn't seem that it takes a lot of rain before the equipment gets blown out. So they're putting PVC piping to try and protect it, and I guess we'll find out whether or not that's going to work. So the only well I have is Goat Hill. It is today at 6.16. The median is 6.36, so it's about 0.2 low. It is at the about the 37 percentile. And what I've been told from the USGS that although they weren't transmitting numbers, the numbers are in the unit. So we're going to have a lot of information shortly.
And then you commented on, well, go ahead, if you have more, go ahead.
Then, well, we have to talk about rainfall and, the rainfall.
February this month, as of 2/24, we have 1.25 inches. And year-to-date number is 7.53 inches. And if you were to compare that to previous years.
I'm sorry, Ken, would you say that again?
Sure. Month to date, 2/24, 1.25 inches. And I can forward you the note, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And year-to-date is 7.53 inches. And when you compare that to previous years, we're a little behind, in essence, relative to where I would like it to be, where we would like it to be. Last year, in February, it was 4.11 and 806 for all of it, year-to-date February. 2021, it was 3.63 with a year-to-date number of 6.63. 2020 was 3.59 with a year-to-date of 5.71. And in 2019, it was 2.84 inches. With year-to-date February was 8.68. And the year before that, 2018, it was 5.18. And year-to-date, 2018 was 8.60 inches. So we are well below average for February this year, but we're about normal relative to year-to-date numbers. And so it's important next month, basically, in another month, we have replenishment time coming up for another couple months. And so let's hope that we get some precipitation in March.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, there he is. Oh.
Come. Hey, Doug.
Hey.
Don't send that to.
So that's why I'll send that to you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm late. All right. So again, obviously there's not a lot we can do about February's rainfall, but we keep our eye on it and hopefully catch up with all the
There'll
data.
be some precipitation today.
Right. Okay. So unless there's more that we need to cover on what rain fell. So Lisa's not here, but she had wanted us to nevertheless consider this poster that her son had worked on. And I don't know what would need to, if, again, she's looking to, post this in various locations around the island. So I don't know BJ or Meg, if there are any things that would need to be on it from a legal or town point of view. If we're good with it, do we like it?
Probably should show it. I'll bring it up tomorrow. And I have an electronic, she sent it to us, right?
Yeah, this doesn't do it justice.
No, it doesn't. It's a nice.
Right, it's a very pretty poster. It's just,
So I'll
so,
bring it up tomorrow in the.
yeah, but you should have it in your email. Okay, so, I mean, we think this is a great idea, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks it's a great idea.
Yeah, we'll just see if there's anything that we should add, like maybe, I don't know if the town seal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think that's what Lisa's looking for.
Yeah.
Right,
So we'll bring that up in the meeting tomorrow and get you an answer.
okay.
We're gonna put it in the paper as well as post, a little ad or something like that.
I think that's a great
I
idea.
think it is a good idea.
Maybe the newspaper could do an article on the poster,
Right.
and we get some copy, and we don't necessarily have to post an advertisement.
Think about it, Julie.
Julie?
She doesn't have to report.
Got it.
Hi, Julie. Let us know if we should talk to you or to someone in your office.
I'll take care of it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so,
Looks good, because we also could make up some 8.5 by 11s if we wanted to put around on some scarce places that there are posters. There are poster spaces now in the winter. They fill up in the summer.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
And this size is a good size. This fits the Islander,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
has no room ever.
So we'll discuss it tomorrow if it's good to go, or we need to make changes.
yeah, and I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's the arts and crafts budget for the Water Advisory Committee or, All right. Okay, so if there's nothing more that we need to do right now on the poster, we wanted to get a report back on where things are at with, what's our progress with the center system, SEPA review, what we're anticipating now.
Yep. The SECRA review and final report is expected in the next week or two. Largely, we're waiting for final comments from Suffolk County and New York State. They are sorting out the jurisdiction for this project. There seemed to be some confusion amongst the regulatory agencies as to who was issuing our permit, and so the SECRA review process can't come to a conclusion until that is resolved. So we're working with Suffolk County now to finalize that issue, and then the report will be ready for release to the public. That report will have answers to all of the environmental, financial, impact-related questions that came up as part of the initial presentations.
Good. That's what we need.
What's the next step? Is permitting after the report?
The next step, let's see, the SEPA process. Yeah, I suppose the next step would be, formal permit meetings with the regulatory agencies. Yep. And simultaneously, we're waiting to hear back about funding from various grant sources, and concurrently would be the final design of the project.
Right, and is one of those grant sources New York State DEC?
That's the only one we're waiting to hear back from, and the most
So
substantial.
that went in at the last cycle.
The last cycle, yeah, we're in what I keep referring to as overtime on a decision for that. Typically, the announcements on the grants are made at the end of the previous year. You apply halfway through that given year, you find out at the end of the year. So we were hoping to know by December. That's how it's typically been closed out, those respective cycles. So now that we're into 2023, we're overdue. And the state typically announces the different categories of grants, and they've been doing so. So the lack of hearing about our category really has nothing to do with our application, just a matter of how the state chooses to announce the awardees. So they've been making announcements on other categories. Ours for water quality hasn't been made yet. So
Finalized, yeah.
yeah, quite literally, we're it's any day. But we're
It sounds
hoping-
like it's any day for a whole bunch of stuff.
yeah, exactly. So we're hoping that by the end of the first quarter, that's
We know much more.
we should know. Yeah, and the answer would be a yes or a no at this stage. Either you got it or you don't get it.
Right, the permit.
The funding.
Oh, the funding.
The grant award.
Then what about detailed engineering?
So that would happen concurrently with our, with our permit application.
I see.
Yeah.
Run it parallel.
And largely, we're waiting for secret to conclude, to take any feedback from the environmental and the impact review to be incorporated into final design.
Is there any point where, you're going to get the report, it's going to be issued, is there a presentation to be made
Oh,
to the
yeah.
public?
Oh,
How does
yeah.
that, I mean,
Yes.
that would be part of the process here, right?
Definitely, yeah. The expectation is that the consultant who's managing SECRA is going to deliver their conclusions in one form or another, a work session, public hearing. I'm not sure exactly, but typically those things are a part of the process. I don't know that there's a formal requirement for a public hearing, so to speak, but certainly
Certainly, we want to have a public presentation of.
Exactly. Yeah,
what the
exactly.
Findings are.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And that report would be made available to the public as well.
And that would respond to some of the issues that were brought up.
All of them. Yeah, all of them.
Those issues.
Yep, all of them. The purpose of this consultant was to independently validate whether those concerns were legitimate. The ones that were required us to dig in deeper to answer. And so that was their primary purpose is in developing an assessment of the impact, whether this has a positive, negative, no impact. And so,
We'll know then, and basically, this is the final kind of
yeah.
stamp of approval or.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a totally organic process. We didn't
Right.
invent this. This is the,
Required.
exactly, this is the sequence you would go through.
But it's an independent third-party process.
It is. The town has the option to do this themselves. We elected to have a third-party specialist do this work.
Right.
And it's basically New York State as well as Suffolk County rules and regulations that go into this
The process?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Process.
Right, yeah. For the S and secret is for state.
Because there were issues that were brought up regarding where things were going to be put. In other words, the effluent, things like that, that had to be addressed.
Right. Right.
Okay, so, yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Is the funding decision all or nothing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't mean that one can't go into the next cycle. But for that cycle, you either get the grant or you.
It's like a college admission. You put together your paperwork, they make a decision, you're in or you're out. And for the exact amount of money that you requested, they can't come back and say, we had a lot of great candidates, so we're giving everybody half of what they requested. It's your request, you get it or you don't. And like Peter said, you can reapply next year or.
Yep. Got it.
But usually there's some guidance on that, right, Joe?
It gets ranked, right?
Right.
It gets ranked, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So whether to waste your time or not, you have some guidance.
Right, there are funding priorities, and how effectively it's how your project stacks up against those priorities. And that's the one grant. So we had also applied to Suffolk County's Water Quality Improvement Program for a smaller grant award, and that was conditionally approved as well.
Okay. Other things on the secret review or on the just progress on the center that other people? So I should mention, so Joe and James Eklund, chair of WQI, and I, and Jay Card, who's managing the infrastructure for Garners Bay Country Club, met a few weeks ago. I had met earlier with Jay as well. He's repeated to me multiple times that if we were interested in pursuing a program of reuse of wastewater, Garners Bay Country Club, he feels, would use whatever water was able to be reclaimed from a center system in a phase 2 kind of project from the center system. I mention it here in this meeting, knowing that Jim also mentioned it at the CAC, and it's something that really ought to be something that's in public discussion at this point. So the goal with a system like that is sort of similar to the goal that the engineer who spoke to us from Nantucket said, which is that at the end of a pipeline, you kind of want pure water. you want water that, and that's their system, discharges into the Atlantic. So maybe their requirements might feel like less, but here on Shelter Island, even more importantly, this water is going to be recycled, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously by recharging the aquifer with it. So whatever water we have is going to be recycled. So therefore, the Gardens Bay Country Club would be interested in sort of taking the next stage. If we brought water to their borderline, they would disinfect it, do UV treatment, do all the things necessary, that this was actually usable for non-agricultural irrigation applications, of which certainly they have. My own personal take on this whole topic is that our best bet is not just reuse. I mean, it's going to be reused one way or another, but not just reuse in non-agricultural irrigation applications, but that this water to a degree be distributed, that reuse be, that we pursue a program of seeking water reclamation, water reuse throughout the island, so that we're talking about dispersing water, not concentrating water. That said, Gardens Bay Country Club is like sort of one of
Because they're
one
going
of the
to,
wonderful places you could distribute water over a very
because
large.
they're going to move ahead with plans for irrigation.
And they want to,
Is what they.
Want to, yeah.
they certainly
And
want to.
this-
That
this is
doesn't
what's going to
mean,
help them
they
with
can.
with that whole process of wanting to increase. Remember last time, I think it was about 2 years ago or something like that, they had a proposal. This was jointly with the expansion of the building and so forth that they were going to put there for housing. They were going to then increase irrigation.
and
go
go
I have a
ahead.
question, Joe. What's the volume of water? If
The
you,
plant output.
yeah,
So the design capacity is around 8,000 gallons per day. That's typically about double what your regular throughput is. So your typical day would be about 4. And then there's some seasonal variations that we would expect for this system because some facilities would be closed in the summertime, closed on the weekends, things like that. So in the summer, contrary to other systems, ours would probably be running a little bit lower than average because the school's closed, there's less activities at the library and things. So we'd probably be in the 2,000 to 3,000 range during the summer as an average flow.
So you did a quick multiplication
at 8,000.
at 8,000, but that's maximum capacity.
Yeah.
So what do you think the average is?
But that's actually an interesting number. What you're finding is about 2.8 million gallons would be the maximum
That's
capacity
assuming-
per year that would come out of this system.
That's a 350-day year, I guess.
Running at max, running at full, which is not
350-day
likely.
year at 8,000, but
Yeah, this partnership, to make it work, would be all about storage, because we would be sending them
right.
a relatively stable supply of water, but their needs are somewhat compressed. Not only are they irrigating in a shorter, you don't irrigate in the winter, so you're already compressed to say 6 months out of the year. And then of that 6 months, you'll use a tremendous amount of that in July and August or whatever your dry period is. So, 2,000 gallons a day doesn't help you if you need 100,000 gallons that day. So this system would have to have some substantial storage involved. And what I've come to learn, both in talking with Jay and looking into this a little bit more, is that that's not uncommon for golf courses. Wastewater reuse is a relatively common practice, particularly out of our area, places like Florida, and even places as close as Riverhead are utilizing wastewater for golf course irrigation. The town, as a matter of fact, explored this in partnership with the Heights plant to connect with the Goat Hill town-owned golf course. So, this is certainly not a novel idea. The timing lines up with what Ken was saying, that the Gardens Bay Country Club is looking to expand their own irrigation use. So in my mind, this has the potential to be a grand slam. And this helps an entity like the golf course expand their capabilities, the quality of their course, and it may double in making use of water that otherwise would be going into the ground.
I'll point out just right at that point in what you're saying, and potentially replace nitrogen applications.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah.
On the golf course.
Nitrogen what?
Applications.
Yeah.
They are putting extra nitrogen in order to grow their grass on the
Yeah.
golf course.
So,
We
great
have the
water.
opportunity to
Yeah.
replace that
Yeah.
with nitrogen that we're looking for a place to put.
And likely receive an enhanced biofiltration by applicating it to the surface.
Biofiltration, exposure to the sunlight.
Yeah.
So disinfectant.
Was there a discussion of what their containment or impoundment capacity, existing capacity is with the ponds that they have?
I'll just mention that their proposal that they're working with right now involves putting in a 200,000 gallon tank. It's not enough for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What we're talking about would be in addition to that, but they're already talking about a certain amount of trickle feeding a storage tank in the winter when demand is lower, and then reusing in the summer. They're trying to even out. And they're talking about water capture and so forth into the aquifer and, potential. Anyway, the addition of more storage tanks is clearly a key part.
Presumably that would be below grade.
Below grade,
And to be well,
courses I've done it with retention ponds and surface
Yeah,
water.
that's
So
the classic way.
these would be either a whole nother subset of regulations when it comes to water reuse, of how it's applied, how it's treated, how it's applicated. So, at some point, we can't make these deals until we have advanced the project to a place where we can engage a regulator. So at this stage, I'm just excited that we have an eager and willing partner like the Country Club, and I think this speaks to the larger potential of having a centralized system and the opportunities that you get by having the efficiency of collecting to one place, treating to one standard. This kind of partnership is not possible if you're looking at everybody having their own individual, on-site system, because you don't treat to that standard, you don't have individually the amount of volume where it makes sense. And it's coming to light, as more of these entities like Garner's Bay Country Club are looking for more resources, that the only one we really have a lot of is ones that need to be reused. We can't expect irrigation to be solely groundwater extraction. That we just don't have enough of the resource for everybody to do that.
And in some ways, this water is better for them than groundwater. Nitrogen-laced water is precisely what.
Yeah, in fact, Jay had mentioned that.
You could clean it too much.
That's irrigation, and I don't have much exposure to this, but water used for irrigation, there is desirable water to be used for irrigation in its mineral content and chemical composition. It can be too clean, as he said. If the water is too clean or has a certain mineral balance, it can actually strip and remove minerals from the biomass. So they have to re-add that. Yeah, exactly. So
the only thing you have to be concerned about would be all the other strange things find in there, like PFOAs or
Testing and screening is going to be critical.
yeah. So there are existing standards for water reuse. We wouldn't be recreating that. In fact, the only one that I'm aware of that's widely accepted is the California reuse standard. And so, we don't have to worry about coming up with. Yeah, exactly. Those things exist, and we would rely on our regulators to insist on certain levels of treatment, certain levels and means of application. So at this level, it's really more about establishing a mutual interest and benefit and partnership. And it sounds like we might have something like that.
Suffolk County doesn't have their little regulation already on this. I'm surprised. They're usually leading the pack when it comes to.
And we have at least one in Suffolk County. The Riverhead plant operates in conjunction with Indian Island to do exactly this. That operation is a little bit different in that the volumes are so much higher. It's an on-demand irrigation system, so they call for water, they get it, the plant sends it over to them. We don't have that kind of volume, so we
different treatment methodologies too with aeration. And
yeah, exactly, right.
ponds.
But that system diverts, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons of water from going directly into the Peconic estuary at what we know to be the a critical location at the western terminus. So
Yes.
Can I ask you to a little bit of clarification on the system, the CEQA operation that's being done now for for the system, wastewater system, and this phase two? I would presume that we're talking about phase two now, but it's probably premature to have a lot of conversation about it because
Totally.
a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff has to happen.
Totally. I think phase two, I think that's a helpful term to use so that you don't marry these two conversations together.
That's exactly what I was concerned
You know,
about.
a partnership to irrigate with Gardner's Bay Country Club has nothing to do with the process that we're embarking on now to get the plant evaluated, designed, funded. But it goes to show, I think, what future opportunities you might have if this infrastructure is in place.
Phase one can occur, it opens up the possibility, right, of reuse.
Super. Yeah, it's just that, you know, it's very easy on this island to get, you know, topics kind of rolling on top of each other and intertwining. And that's not what we should make sure that phase two is, you know, when you can knock on the door of the building that has the equipment in it, then you can get serious about, okay, where are we going to put the line to pump it up to Gardner's Bay? That's a different, it's not the same thing.
No, we're certainly not putting paint on the ground to show where the pipe to Country Club will go. That's not the case, but I think it is important to highlight the opportunities that come along and the interest that may help garner support for one solution or another for phase one. Yeah, I think these are things that, you know, we had looked at in other parts of the island that could, you know, very much come to reality if the phase one is executed as planned.
Another interesting side thing is phase three, which you could look at the.
Ken's on to phase three already. Yes.
Talk about pylon.
Presbyterian Church,
Basically, that gets pumped. I forget the periodicness of it as to how many gallons that tank holds, but it was recently pumped, which is almost like pure nitrogen.
And salt. Yeah, the holding tank you're talking about?
Yeah, the whole thing. I don't know what else is in there, but theoretically, it's the nitrates. I'm not too sure about what else could be in that effluent. But if it's nitrate,
You're thinking about concentrate, well, and also you're thinking about that both in terms of relation to the center system and then beyond.
I'm just saying, and so it costs today something to take it from here to Riverhead.
Right.
And put it in their disposal methodology.
Yes, yes. What Ken's referring to in our system at the church to remove nitrogen, we contain and hold the backwash substance. So when the filtration system regenerates, recharges, just like in our reverse osmosis, we capture the backwash because it's so concentrated. So instead of returning it to the ground where we would presumably then pick it up and have to filter it again, we contain it, and that periodically gets collected from a septic company who trucks it just like regular sewage to Riverhead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So that comes at a cost. Yeah.
I don't think it's a salt-based system either. That it's a resin-based system, I believe, that is used. So you don't have, you don't have a concentration of salt in there that you have to continue.
There's no salt in the nitrogen removal system, but there's salt in the system, and what is contained is quite salty. That's
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
yeah, and quite high in nitrogen.
So may or may not.
It may not work, yeah.
Right.
It's a
Very much phase three, so since
gallons a year. Yeah. But
Yeah, anyhow.
all in the same concept. Yeah.
Can I ask that?
Phase four.
No, this is not, this is back to phase one here.
yes, phase one.
But, it's been, I guess, a couple months since there have been any drawings, what's planned. I know that a lot of people have requested stuff, and it's like when the seek was done. Is there any, it waits on the report in mid-March for people to say, where is the system going to be?
No, this not up for contemplation is where the system will be, rather what is the impact of the current proposed location.
Okay, so that's the man wearing.
That's right.
16 Manwaring, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of scratching your head, I wonder where it is, but that's okay.
I know where
Yeah, no, the outcome is not to
I mean,
be,
it's fine to know that.
here's 3 other places. Certainly, the impact analysis considers alternatives. That's a requirement. One of the alternatives is to look at individual systems. That was largely probably the most outspoken alternative. And so those conditions were evaluated. And in terms of other sites, it's really a review of how we landed on 16 Manwaring, because as you might recall, there were many sites that were evaluated that led to the suggestion for 16 Manwaring.
Is this field a long?
This field was evaluated. Yep.
It was.
Yes.
Right, and I think the firehouse is a.
The firehouse extensively, Fisk Field, the airfield, many sites. I don't want to get sidetracked with the selection criteria, but for one reason or another, those sites were all eliminated from it.
And maybe we'll revisit a couple of those sites, but as we go into the later parts of our discussion. So just moving along a little bit, unless there's more that anybody needs to go over in terms of center system progress. I was wondering, Greg, if you could kind of very briefly just give us a sense for the WQI discussion and funding of the Eelgrass.
The Cornell Co-op Extension, they came forward with a request for funding from the WQI for something on the order of 200,000. It has a couple of, it is all based on aquatic habitat restoration. That's the category that we evaluated against. It includes planting of eelgrass in places that used to have eelgrass that don't have eelgrass now. We have looked through information that they provided and also did some investigation on what's the importance of eelgrass? And there were a great number of studies and processes where people are trying to put eelgrass together. Shellfish use it, finfish use it, it's a nursery.
Right, so these things are intertwined. The eelgrass reseeding and the shellfish reseeding is all
And that's together, right? A second portion of it was seeding those areas. Let me back up real quick to the second habitat area, which was an oyster reef. The Cornell people have made arrangements with a number of restaurants, high usage of oysters. And a part of the life cycle of the oysters, the larvae attach themselves to shell. And they have made arrangements with a number of restaurants. They're taking the shells, used shells. They've got an area at Sylvester Manor where they leave them sit for 8 months or so to dry out, to get, I guess it's in the sunlight. They're pure, they're not. They then place them at a certain area. Right now, the location would be kind of at the top end of Copples Harbor. Whether or not that's what it will be ultimately, they're still evaluating. Well, maybe other areas might be better for the oyster reef. And then as you noted, a larger amount than we ordinarily have of scallops and hard clams and oysters, spreading out hundreds of thousands of viable organisms. Part of that happens on Shelter Island, growing them. Right now, there's I guess it's 1 or 2 tanks of the growth media that they use to feed oysters and scallops. And they're going to expand that. They call them flopsies, but that's another story. The request again was $200,000. It was unfortunate that the application didn't, there are those specific things. There's planting the eelgrass. There's the oyster reef. They broke the order out, the request out by different departments at Cornell. So the aquaculture team, which is the people that grow the cost of that. You don't know directly for its impact on, say, the oyster reef or the growing of the eelgrass. So we made a request. We said, in the future, we think that you should do this. There was time of the essence a little bit on this, trying to get this. They have a lead time to get things growing, as it were. So our recommendation to the town board was that they should approve the funding request as was at $200,000 approximately.
It seemed to me, listening, that much of what they were funding was this necessary science in order to do plant seedings in multiple places and see which areas would
They will certainly be evaluating what's working, what's not.
temperature and water flow in those areas and looking for where things naturally work, where there's, right?
That is correct.
Right. So I think that there's a sort of a science end of that the WAC might want to be like staying on top of.
Sure. Okay.
So I'm just, I'm wondering if we're all, I think that this is, interestingly enough, it overlaps with some of what we've talked about at Monantic, and what other people are interested in doing, that I think that we may want Katie or Rossi Snook, or, we might want these folks to come in and speak with us a little bit about it as well as WAC.
I think that would be an interesting joint committee, have both committees come in and have Cornell come in and say, okay, they're still evaluating, right? Okay, where are we going to put the oyster reef? They're still working out some details.
Right.
Once they get those details out, I think they would be more than happy to come in and say, okay, here's what we've come up with as the plan.
All of us would want to be thinking about, will this work? Or how's it working, and what will the impact? What's the potential impacts?
A question on the involvement of the Baymen at this stage of the game. Are we anywhere along there, like with the waterways guys or the other Baymen people regarding placement? And
there was a presentation made by Cornell to the town board about 3 weeks ago or so, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And my impression was that they had given some input. The one great piece of input.
They were here.
The Bateman were here for
They
the
were here.
presentation. Yeah.
And their input is significant, let's face it.
yes,
So it was Ken Clark who said, hey, you're gonna plant eelgrass in Cockles Harbor? I haven't seen it looking so good in many a year. It's really good right now. But there's actually good science that was presented as to why you would want to extend an existing
Good area.
eelgrass patch.
Because nature's telling you where it works.
Yeah, and so, we'll certainly, Kate, will circle back to Ken.
interesting.
So in terms of a start, to take what is already working and make it bigger and cover more.
That's an interesting way to expand it.
I just wanted to add, if I could, the numbers, because they're stunning. It's 10 million oyster larvae, 250,000 clam stock, 100,000 bay scallops. These are numbers much bigger than we've ever done. And 10,000 shoots of eelgrass. Because the thought is mass is important. That this is the study part of it. I think it's that the size of the effort will matter ultimately.
Did they ever mention the siting criteria that they use? I mean, they must, to decide from this place versus that place.
So Meg is nodding her head, and I'll let her comment on that. I also wanted to jump in, but go for it.
I was just gonna say they do based on temperature and I was gonna say turbidity, but the amount of sunlight that would reach the bottom where the grass would be
All
growing.
right, so the reason I wanted to jump in on that was because it's data. What they're doing is sort of distributed data efforts all around these different areas. They're looking at lots of target sites.
Right.
And then they're collecting deep data, it's data a meter down, and it's very specific kinds of data, but it's temperature data, it's flow data, it's climate change data from our point of view. That's what's going on. Climate change is stressing the shellfish. So, and the eelgrass. So that's, they're looking for naturally cool spots, natural flow. So I was as I was listening in on the WQI on this, I'm like lusting for their data.
Well, exactly, because the data could indicate where things are not healthy just as much as where they are healthy.
Well, where there's zero grass, the concept is to expand upon something that's there already and make it bigger, which is a whole different way of looking at this, where they tried to put it in places where there wasn't any eelgrass to begin with, like in West Neck.
And it doesn't work.
And it turns
Do
out-
they have any data
And the
on,
crabs, it doesn't take many crabs to like knock off a couple, and those are the ones that basically take the eelgrass and eat it.
Right.
Because doesn't take many crabs to.
And conditions are good for the crabs.
That's right. So this is a good, interesting
But
thing
you
to
get a
learn.
lot of data from it because the turbidity really says a lot about the water quality. So if you have really low turbidity, which means like the sunlight isn't able to penetrate very deeply, that
Yep.
means you have a lot of algae blooms, you have a lot of sediment in the water, you have a lot of things that are causing problems that
Yeah.
are. And so, we'll have some decent data to work with as far as
That's
water
good, yeah.
temperature goes and.
This cockles has been historically
West
about the last place we have
These
scallops.
things,
Right.
yes.
Right, and so that'll be the peak of season, so the peak of summer is where you're really gonna know
And the
if you have
USGS.
good water quality or not, because that's when your turbidity will get affected,
Yeah.
that's when you'll have algae blooms. you'll
Because the latest report
debris.
talks about how the parasite is basically that plus the lobster spawning, the heat, and then combination with that.
Well, and
They're
yeah,
weakened so much with not enough oxygen in the water,
Right,
and that's on the scallop side.
right. And the parasites are taking advantage of the weakening
Yes.
in the first place, right?
Exactly.
So.
Are
right.
becoming prevalent because of that, yeah.
Right. So I do want to, I want to follow up on this in terms of data. I also want to follow up on this on the idea of, okay, where can citizen science work and what kind of conditions would you need to create for things to work elsewhere on smaller scales, so anyway, and get the community involved in it. Andrew.
So this is not my field, okay, at all. But my general understanding is the habitat used to be a lot better than it is now.
Tremendous.
Okay. So we're now trying to restore the habitat. Do we really understand why it degraded and the root cause of that? And is anything being done about those root causes? Because if not, are we just going to have a repeat of what?
This is what BJ wrote us all in the first place was, is it, we're not going to solve one problem independent of another.
It's fixing Tommy Fields, it's fixing the cart, but the horse is dying. That's what he said. We're gonna plant, do all this, great, good that you're fixing the cart, but the horse that's pulling it is, the
Dying.
overall environment is dying. And so he is adamant, and he is not the only one that has cornered me in the last month that we started talking about this. We have to do something about pesticides and fertilizers. We just have to. So, we can't wait till Lisa gets back.
So,
it's not just the pesticides and fertilizers, it's also the nitrates from our septic waste
Yes.
going out into the basin estuaries, which are degrading the wetlands. Because the plant matter doesn't have to work so hard to get nutrients, so they have a weak root system. So you get a nor'easter and it tears up the wetlands and you actually lose that ecosystem. It can wash away huge masses of
Right.
wetlands in a storm. And that's one of the biggest problems, and it's the high nitrate loading in the surface waters from fertilizers, but also from our own waste entering into the surface water through our groundwater. So that's why Suffolk County started the whole septic improvement program back in 2015. So it's multifaceted, the problem, but so is the solution. And so it's.
And I.
okay, so here,
Well, Andrew, I'm going to make your problem slightly worse and then you can comment. So among the things that we can't control is that this climate change thing. We're not going to solve climate change,
No.
right? So temperature is changing and that's also a root cause here. But that doesn't mean we're helpless. We can't prevent the temperature from changing, but it does mean that the locations where the shellfish could survive are going to shift a little bit. We kind of have to see it in different areas and move along and see where nature is now working, where things are a little cooler now.
Breed for resilience.
And this is going to get us back to the overall comprehensive planning. Water's going to move inland. And unless we're ready to provide new mud flats and new areas for estuary to grow into, we aren't able to address things like the shift in climate as a part of this equation. But it's a multi-dimensional, it's a multi-factor problem.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking the question is $200,000 sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Starting to sound less and less.
all right. I don't want to fail, because if we fail, we won't get it again.
But we have to define success to make that statement in my mind. So one of the arguments made was if we achieve a 20% success rate, by which I mean 20% of the eelgrass supply that lives, 20% of the seedings of the shellfish survives, is that good enough? Given the kind of awful state, and Cocos Harbor right now is a pretty good place, but still a shellfish, but given the awful state of the habitat, to me, that would be a success. How do you feel?
I don't know enough to
Yeah.
answer.
But
I don't know enough.
This is the reason we want to have them come in and address us, because, for instance, these questions came up at the WQI, and part of the answer was they expect a very high failure rate. You want the high failure rate. What you're trying to do is have nature reveal to you where it works and doesn't work. So therefore, the $200,000 program has been designed with a kind of a scattershot plotting of where they're going to be doing littler plantings, so as to allow some to fail and tell us that, and to then find the areas where now nature can succeed.
Okay, so let's control the narrative so that when we get that kind of an outcome, you head off the claim that this is just another government boondoggle that did not.
And I have another.
That's where I'm coming
I have another answer for that, Andrew. I think this is government's job to sort of find out, to operate
Know what
an
works.
NIH.
Yeah.
So in my mind, this is a little mini NIH for the scallops. It's actually doing some, basic science. And hopefully we get a little bit of habitat, we will get habitat improvement.
I just think it's important to define success so that you can actually control that narrative.
My only comment at the end, everybody did great at the WQI. I didn't need to say anything. And my only comment at the very end was, this is the definition of seed money.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Oh,
It's very funny.
You had to say that.
But I think that you can learn a lot from failure. So even if it isn't 100% successful, now you know why and you know how to make it better in the future. So, even if it is a 20% success rate, well, you also have new data explaining why it wasn't successful. And so when you go back, you will be more successful because you have an understanding of what you're working with.
I just want to make sure that the governmental process allows that second round.
Right.
That's all.
Yes.
Right.
This is a multi-year, they're not asking for 200 every year, don't get me wrong, but the thought process here is this is a 5-year program, it's not longer. And then PEP is doing another one that's a couple of years, they should actually help each other in the end with data.
Okay, so we're looking for all the keys that we need to put together in order to have a successful ecosystem program. So this is a piece of the puzzle. Okay, so another piece of the puzzle, unless anybody needs to spend a little more time on this, another piece of the puzzle is that Fresh Pond also was at that same WQI meeting. We just had a small portion of our program to be approved, which was money for permitting, $6,900 to permit us to do short-term cleanup work to keep people safe and to also improve the aquatic habitat. But knowing that it'll grow back. But of the algal mats that cover one section of the pond, started to spread to a second section of the pond, and where we're being choked with decaying lily pads that breed harmful algal blooms, especially near the public access area. So we'll be able to do WQI approve that. That will go to the board. Presumably, Mr. Lombardo will be able to then get us permitting for that work.
So it's to fund consultants to navigate the permitting process.
The money that the WQI just,
6,000.
that 6,000 was for the purpose of actually getting the DEC permits in place.
Right.
And hopefully for this summer, so that we have a clean waterfront right there that is keeping the algal blooms away from where
So
people
that's
are.
the worst, actually, is right over here as you.
The worst is definitely right at the
Right
public
there at
access.
that
Yes. Oh, yeah, because there's a stagnant cove like right to the side of that.
Very
It's
shallow area all
Correct.
through there, yeah.
Right, there's a whole little section there that is where the problem really seemed to start. Now, that's also where the oldest homes are.
Oh,
And also where we know that a couple of not septic systems, cesspools
Oh.
failed
okay, over the years,
over the years. And
yeah.
people, so there have been some replacements. There was an old, a 1980s style one replaced at one point, but then there's another one that they have a permit for an advanced septic system, but then we're a little concerned about nitrogen reducing advanced septic systems without the phosphorus component. So we're working on that. But while we're working on that, to clean up the decaying matter that's really
Take out
causing
the
the
old-
immediate blooms
take out the
for at
old-
least 1 year.
And take out the old tractors and cars.
Yeah. Well, we won't go out deep, and I have a feeling they're sunk all the way, but like,
And typically, when we had a lot of ice around, we used to just drive them out on there and
they tell me there's one in every pond. Anyway.
more.
Anyway. All right, so I mean, I don't think that requires a lot of discussion. So, I want to apologize but one of you, I think Doug maybe mentioned that it wasn't just chapter 10, but chapter 5.
Yeah,
So all of the
Comprehensive plan.
chapters are now available online,
Right,
so all of them. The
right,
environmental chapter, the utilities chapter,
right.
everything is up there, so.
But chapter 10, the utilities chapter, which I asked you all to take a good look at, that is based to a large degree on the natural resources chapter, chapter 5. I don't know to what degree you've looked at it, but I think it's going to be reviewed this evening.
Yes, 6:30 or
Hard to
something like that.
say.
Well, comprehensive plan. So we also have new consultants that we're gonna be working with very, very soon. So at our meeting tomorrow, our board meeting, we're going to be adopting a resolution to hire them. So we're gonna discuss that today at the comp plan meeting. We're gonna discuss the
So consultants
their
may become a bigger
proposal.
portion of the discussion.
They're gonna become,
Right.
yes,
Right.
So
yes.
a little time to
So-
continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
And part of the consultant's, proposal includes discussions with all of you people.
All the groups.
All the
of our
groups, all the committees.
So,
You know.
so that's why I want to have our heads active and wrapped around this stuff a little bit so we can have those conversations intelligently. So I went through, and I would just encourage all of us to go through the entirety of chapter 5 and 10. Chapter 5 has at the end our own waters and surface management.
Groundwater service management plan.
And so we're,
Is that the one, the
WS.
Bevan that we put?
Yeah, that we put
presented
together.
to the town?
Yes, that is,
Okay.
and it bases itself on that plan, which is good. But it brought to, there were a couple of things, I made notes when I went through, so I'm just going to go through my notes real quickly.
Okay.
And maybe I need to make them as comments officially through the website.
Yeah, that would be
Make
great.
them through the website so we have it in writing and we don't.
Right.
Text in the chat.
Can anyone annotate
Yes.
and then?
Yes, anybody can go in and do that.
Anyone can go in, there's a link in every chapter, you click the button and you can add your comments. And so we get all the comments in this massive spreadsheet and then we go and incorporate them into the chapter.
And the consultants will pick that up.
The chapters online are in PDF form, so you can't like go in and
Oh,
sniff it.
right,
But if you have recommendations, absolutely put them into the comments.
or questions.
Yeah,
Right. So and then the only purpose of bringing any of this stuff up right now is not to comment for the comprehensive planning, but for us thinking about the comprehensive plan. Very, very small item, which I will just put in the comments, but there's a small errata that Mike Beebon and John Cronin asked for. It doesn't materially affect anything, but there's a number in the flow diagram that should be improved. There's some of this is time has moved on and there's a few more things that ought to get in there. So there is a mention of how the USGS real-time monitoring that we're doing has the potential to revolutionize our understanding of that, which is great that that's in there. There's no mention of the implementation of the real-time monitoring system at the Southbury Hills.
Correct.
And we ought to get that in there because it's part and parcel of a wider, we're going live, we're going real time, we're streaming Shelter Island.
Right on.
Because
I was working on both ends.
So, there's also a discussion of the wastewater reuse stuff that we were talking about. In a number of places that comes up in both of these two chapters, but it always comes up in relation to the Goat Hill Golf Club, not the Gardeners Bay, of course. So I think that we should I'll encourage, again, I'll make the comment, but I think the easy answer is golf courses.
Yes.
More vague, more expanded, because in fact, we're looking for distributed reuse. Whether it's at the golf courses or this field or Sylvester Manor or wherever makes sense. And people are eager for some more water that's got a little bit of fertilizer in it. Okay, the other thing that that it hasn't been so much a part of our discussion but came up today is that in a number of places, both looking at the problem set with the natural resources and looking at climate change, the issue of a lack of places for nature to fall back, mud flats being drowned, tidal wetlands being drowned, and needing the next layer back, and there not being a gradual enough place for nature to migrate. So we really do need to sort of take on what's our fallback plan, but it's fallback in the face of what we know is inevitably coming.
BJ, were you talking about bulkheading?
Yeah, the hardening of the shoreline.
That's the euphemism they use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bulkheading
And well, hardening and softening are useful, more than euphemisms, they're useful concepts for us.
No, I'm just saying, obviously, they're far more vulnerable than a natural shoreline.
I'm telling you, there's this, we're gonna struggle with it until we're all underwater, which is, what is my right as a waterfront property owner to protect my property versus the island's right to a better chance of surviving?
But they don't have to be, again, because next door to the bulkhead can be an inlet. So it's not all, they're integrated. These things are integrated.
That's the inlet.
It will, but then the inlet is what's going to take the extra water, and then you need a lot of softened shoreline around that inlet. So you're looking for where you can do that, and especially where homeowners need to bulkhead, you may need to think about, okay, now where's the water going?
There's a softer way of doing it than bulkheading.
And is there in each case should be considered.
Well, I think it needs to be.
And those comments would be great in these chapters, because that, if there's alternate ways of doing this, then in the action items, we need to say the town ought to consider alternative ways of protecting home ownership while allowing the
fallback areas for water and so forth. And I think, by the way, about the property around Turcom's Rest and the Robb property. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's where's the water going when it's coming in.
Silver Beach is a perfect example of that, right near the Royer Inlet that we have there. We've had some very, very strong storms this year that just wiped out the beachfront, basically. The sand that we've had and moved it farther north. And what has happened is that, you begin to think about how it changed a lot this year. We're down to sedge underlying areas. And if you go then south in Silver Beach, where it is all bulkheaded, you have nothing. And there used to be probably, 50 yards of sand out in front of all those places.
Beyond the bulkhead.
50 years ago.
Right.
It was all the way, you could walk all the way down to Shell Beach. And hardening that shoreline basically then causes it creeping from one property to the next property to the next property.
And the groins don't impede the transport of sand either. They don't.
They can retard it in little lumps along the way, but it
But
doesn't.
not, yeah, I mean, it's
The literal
it's a
drift.
scallop shell effect or serrated.
The literal drift, basically, that you have
Happens, yeah.
to deal with the tide, in our case, so the tide splits about where I am.
Right.
And so when you get these inlets, and you get them, they have to be dredged, by the way. And then, okay. DEC typically says, oh, you got to put it on the one side or the other side, depending upon the literal drift, which exacerbates the flow of sand one direction or another, as every year you take more out and put it on one side only. No, yeah, so little things like this have been going on in our areas.
Well, and your area is right in the midst of a big flow, so
It's right in the-
therefore you're going to
it's right-
have
it's
that
right
kind
with
of
the
drift. And
north-south
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
flow right there.
Right.
But the island itself, if you look around, there are very few places where we have a lot of beach anymore.
And also the comprehensive plan natural resources section talks about the lack of sediment, that there's not enough time for sediment to build up in the new shallow wetland areas as water moves in. So again, it's keeping things gradual, and you may even want to be thinking about, well, okay, how can
That's almost
ground be improved?
another issue you're dealing with regards to the destruction of wetlands and grasses and so forth.
But I think it's, when we talk about this as an interlocking puzzle with variable
It's multifaceted,
equation.
yes.
Yeah,
The Mashomi is working on that.
I know.
Okay, so basically, they are the ones working with the.
All right, so again, I only raise it because it comes up and it's a topic of importance, and I think that it's something that it should be part of our scientific thinking about how the whole puzzle works. So fallback areas, softening of the floodplain. The last thing I felt I needed to make a note on was that based on our work from 2020 and before, the comprehensive plan makes the comment that the assumption is that the majority of the island will remain on private wells. And probably, the majority of the island will, for the foreseeable future, remain on private wells. However, in some areas, it appears to us that private wells will be incompatible with all of the goals of supplying clean water to the residents. So that brings us, obviously to the topic of that Andrew raised at the end of our last meeting, which is what would be needed now to start to think about in our worst section of the high nitrogen center triangle, providing public water. Andrew.
Okay, so I want to take a step back and go to the early, make a comment about chapter 10.
Okay.
In the water section in the front.
Okay.
There's a statement there that says the natural recharge is a very big number. I think it wasn't in the billions of gallons, but it was in the millions of gallons.
Huge, yeah.
And the withdrawals are a fraction of that.
Mm-hmm.
The implication of that statement is that fundamentally there's really no issue.
Although it does quickly say not all areas are equally blessed.
Right. And I guess maybe this is just a drafting point, but I read that section and I did not come away with the sense of urgency
That you're feeling.
which having sat on this committee and understanding this issue more, the sense of urgency which I think the facts warrant. So if I'm going to go on, I'm going to click on say that this chapter from a water standpoint is making me feel too comfortable. Okay? All right. Because as one of my bosses in the water business said to me, God makes it rain and snow, but God does not give you the water where you want it or when you want it. And that's kind of our problem here, is that we have a fair amount of water in certain parts of the island, but where the demand is, we've got real issues. And that leads you to the topic which you just put forward, which is what's the best way to solve that issue? Because one way or another, it's either going to be solved in some kind of a collective way through a community-based water system, or individuals will take measures on their own to address it because they've simply got too much invested in their real estate to not address it. And the collective implication of those individual solutions may be something that actually makes the problem worse. And so,
for example, reverse osmosis filtration concentrates the waste that then winds up in the, right.
correct.
Mhm.
So I would have liked that chapter to develop that problem a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then to, I think it's an open question, or it's a complicated question as to how to solve it.
Mhm.
But I think that chapter could have addressed that problem a little bit more.
Well, that's part of why I'm raising.
That's the sense of urgency that.
You're saying it in chapter 10, and I mentioned it in chapter 13, the assumption that, well, everybody's going to wind up on private wells may not, I'm thinking it should be commented that that may not be compatible with providing clean drinking water,
On a sustainable.
potable drinking water to these people.
Right.
And you're mentioning that this really ought to be in chapter 10 as well, and that we should be planning before some areas cannot be served by private water successfully.
May not.
Clean water may not be able to
Right.
be served by,
Right.
so.
And also on the wastewater side,
Mhm.
because it's all one resource.
Mhm.
So one of the things I've learned being around all of you for the last year or so is I've taken on a greater sense of urgency about this sets of issues than I did coming on here, than I had. Maybe one reason is that I happen to benefit from a public water.
Right.
This is not a problem that I have to wrestle with alone. This is a problem I wrestle with the other 200 homeowners
In the Heights.
in the Heights, in a very kind of, with a organized board of directors and a long-range planning process, and all of the sorts of things you would see in a utility system.
Right.
Basically, one way or another is in that, is in the DNA of that organization, and it's benefited the community. So I haven't really worried about it. But now that I understand the issues more broadly, I have a sense of urgency about it.
As do, I think, all of us, and hopefully more and more I hear it on Shelter Island as well. People wonder, and so Ken then raised what, again, the question was, so let's just take the worst water that we have on Shelter Island, which I believe is like, we're sitting on it. Or
Worse in terms of what?
what we've seen in terms of homeowners pulling up in terms of nitrogen.
Nitrogen. Certainly this area is.
This area.
Yeah.
But it's not out of spec.
Well, what do you mean by spec?
10 milligrams per liter.
Oh, no,
It's way above that. And I'm thinking more broadly about the extent, not just this parcel, but this neighborhood in general, to my knowledge, is the worst in terms of nitrogen.
Again, we want to nail down data. Greg was, on that for recently, and we will continue to want to be on that.
Yeah.
But we're seeing, again, anecdotally, numbers in the 30s and 40s milligrams of nitrogen in areas around here. I certainly have neighbors between my home and here, closer to here, telling me I got 17, 18 milligrams of nitrogen. Suffolk County tested me. So, again, there's privacy concerns for people. This has to be anonymized data to some degree.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, no, we are seeing currently, look, 5 years ago now, 2016, more than that. We're gonna have to retest pretty soon because we're getting to the 10-year mark in 26. But in 2016, in the center, we pulled up more than 10 milligrams. Just the USGS monitoring. right?
To
Right
me,
here.
unless we have real data from individuals, like we tried to get some from the Cronin report with the triangle that we have in there, and we were able to average it out by street because they didn't want to go with individual residences. I did not think that any of those numbers were above 10 milligrams. I thought they were close to it. Is that, because I keep getting pushback from other people in the community when I talk about public water. You don't have the data. You don't have the information that really says we need to do something on our drinking water side.
Oh, well, I would disagree with
Okay.
with that. Certainly, we do have data. In fact, John Cronin's aquifer model
Did that analysis?
was based off of a large FOIL request to Suffolk County, which I think is the database that you're referring to about streets
Right.
rather than individuals.
Right.
That was a way to sidestep some of the privacy concerns. That right now is the best collective data set that we have. One trouble with the street is some of the streets are quite long. There's street addresses, Route 114, then that it's hard to narrow in on where.
It's a whole block like that, right.
But largely the outcome from that model was that the triangle area showed elevated nitrogen versus being outside the triangle.
Elevated meaning?
Higher. And I think this was in 20, no, higher than its neighbors outside of the triangle, that there was an elevated concentration average versus being outside of the triangle.
But we don't know the number.
However,
We can get we can look at,
I'm just-
I have that database, so we can get.
and we have data points, whether we can speak to them about a specific address or not, we have data points showing the kinds of numbers that I'm
That's the kind of
referencing.
thing.
30
that
milligrams.
the public,
and-
I think a lot of people that I know.
And again,
And it's important, we don't conflate, the issue of generally higher nitrogen in an area with isolated nitrogen or other contaminants to a specific parcel. There are some parcels that have high nitrogen because their well happens to be 50 feet from their neighbor's cesspool. And that's just how it was made 100 years ago. And so they are going to deal with the contamination or a quality issue that's perhaps unique to their parcel that maybe one block away they don't have. But the data, I think, broadly shows you without a shadow of a doubt that there are elevated nitrogen levels in the center of the island because this happens to be more densely populated and probably occupied for the longest period of time.
That's right.
And occupied more likely on a year-round basis versus on a seasonal basis. So, I think it's a really poor excuse to say we don't have the data or that's not the reason why we need public water.
I just haven't seen a number written down with, that kind of a thing. That's all I just.
But I agree that even though I think that, if Greg goes and digs through our records and stuff and kind of gives us some averages in some certain areas or whatever data we come up with, that's actual real data.
That would be.
I'm pretty confident it will confirm what we've found repeatedly already. But it's worth doing precisely for the reason you're stating, which is that people push back.
That's exactly right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
You need it.
I think what the underlying issue with regard to the approach towards public water is that it seems to me, and I'm not a long-time island, I'm not even an islander currently, but it seems that we marry this issue of public water with other issues the community struggles to face, like development and density and public or water supply in general should not influence those other decisions.
Affordable housing, all the other kind of things.
That's irrelevant. Yes, undoubtedly there have been instances where decisions on your water infrastructure impact what, your community's density and development. But, from an engineer's perspective, certainly from a public health perspective, you shouldn't be making decisions about your water infrastructure because of a fear of an inability to legislate on these other, in my mind, unrelated issues. And so when you
control development separate.
Let's not go quite there yet. That's kind of at a policy level.
Okay.
Let's just be clear that the maximum contaminant level for nitrates in potable drinking water is 10. Right.
Well, and we don't know that that's a sufficient standard, that's the US standard.
That's the US standard. Right. So let's just accept that.
Okay.
If I were running a water company and I were serving water to my customers with with nitrates over 10, I would be filing notices of exceedance with the state agency that is responsible for administering the Safe Drinking Water Act for the feds. And I would be filing remediation plans. And I would be noticing my customers, particularly my immunosuppressed or particularly vulnerable segments of the population, as to what was going on in their water, okay? And this would be, if I were running a water company that was serving water like this would be a major issue. And a problem that I would have to solve, and if I didn't solve it, I'd get ordered to solve it. All right. That's what would happen if the water served by this water was served by a licensed, regulated water company. All right.
We happen to have one.
Well, no. If we have anecdotal evidence to believe that we have people consuming water that doesn't meet Safe Drinking Water Act standards, even if it's from out of their own wells, right? All right. Then the question is, what kind of obligation do we have, moral or legal, to address that issue? And in my opinion, we have a positive obligation to address that issue. So I don't want to let this one, I don't want to just talk about this.
Right.
I want to actually do something.
So Ken said that too, and he said, okay, well, so Suffolk County Water Authority will be the water supplier, and they have said that if a certain number of people within a neighborhood demand water, they'll put it in. They'll get it going. So Ken said maybe it would be helpful for us to have, who are all those people in the center high nitrogen triangle, like their addresses, their names, and maybe talk to them.
That's where I was going. Like,
or you could conduct a survey.
Sure.
With those citizens and ask them a whole series of questions on an anonymous basis so that you could then assemble the data to give you a sense of whether or not you had the critical mass on a density basis in order to take the step that you guys are talking about.
Now, we didn't post it on the website, partly because we didn't, and partly because we shouldn't, because it's private individuals' data. But BJ used the GIS mapping system to map the center triangle, do some circles in the areas of the center triangle, and give us that list. We have the addresses, we have the phone numbers, we have the names.
And we have numbers of houses. I think that basically we have a count. And we have
We have
It's
that.
about 500.
Homes.
Yeah.
homes or?
Now, we could narrow in, we could get closer to the extreme, the center.
Most of them have a structure in the center.
150 homes.
500
500
500 homes or 500 people?
residences.
properties.
Residences on every home?
The center is, the nitrogen triangle is big, and the center is dense.
1,500 people, more or less.
So
Big objection to all of this, by the way, no matter if it's bad or good or whatever we do, is money. It gets down to,
Yep.
I don't care how bad it is, okay? I don't want public water, I don't want to pay for it. Because I've never had it that way and so forth, and that's the way I want to be. Which gets you down to the next issue of district. And how would we bill, or would it be fair to distribute the cost over the whole island as a, in quotes, common aquifer? We have a lot, these are all different kinds of ways of slicing this thing.
But I do
into
think
pieces.
that it starts from, if you talk to all of those people and are willing to share with them what you know about their water or the water in the center, how many of them would say, yes, I would like water, and yeah, I see I'll have to pay
a good
$2,000 for a
point, yeah.
hookup,
I'd
and
like
how
to-
many of them would say, yeah, I'd pay $2,000 for a hookup if that
I'd like
was
to-
there?
It's hard to say. It's really hard
I
to say.
don't know that, I actually want to find that out door to door.
Yeah.
Well, that's the best way to figure it out.
But that's, I mean, I'm not saying I have time for 500 knocks, but still,
People
Yeah.
have guns in this, and
I have a sort of flip side to this, sort of another concept. The other option is to remediate the water quality in the center. So if you stop polluting it, then that massive number of recharge will help solve some of this problem. That's where, the 4 billion gallons of recharge every year comes into play. So if we can aggressively stop putting our wastewater back into the aquifer in the center in a rather quick period of time, it may start to reverse itself.
Right.
Because you're now changing the balance.
Right.
So on that, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, and we may be able to do that faster than getting public water to everybody, because there's already mechanisms in place for upgrading septic systems with grants and state and county backing and everything else.
Right, and in this very, very center where it seems to be the highest problem, we have a proposal at least that we're hoping may continue on down in the track to fully remediate that, potentially completely remediate it by reusing that water. So anyway, but that said, I do, one other comment that I will make on the website, and but I'll make it now because it's relevant, is that what we found was the USGS maps that were used at the time and are used, the maps of travel time to the shore for water, were refined between when what is here was used and the assumptions that were made here in the comprehensive plan were made. Right in the very, very narrowest section of the center, right around us here, travel time to shore is not on that 50-year time frame that the comprehensive report assumes, but more on the centuries.
Right. Yeah, it's a long time.
Right here, right in the immediate hydrological center. So yes, maybe we can do something more to flush waste out of there, but we have a section that is presumably will be a very long time before it's supplied.
Well, the answer is both. The answer is both. You have to do both. It's not one or the other.
The answer is both.
You should be much more mindful of what you're contributing to the resource, but there's no reason why. And back up again to water distribution, that's just if you have a quality problem, a particular quality problem that you would benefit from a distribution system, but there are many communities that have a quantity problem, that don't have access to potable water at all in any sort of quantity. So water distribution solves many different problems.
It does, like rising tides and storms that we would get along very expensive homes along low-lying areas on the shoreline. But it's a related issue, having to do and needing pipes and a well. So like my thought was, instead of having to get 40% of the people to sign up for anything, why couldn't we ask the Suffolk County Water Authority as a water advisory board to give us an estimate on being able to put a pipe somewhere near the center, in essence, up to a point. That would mean they'd have to find water, or it would say, where are we going to put a well or two or whatever? Give me some logic. They wouldn't have to drill a hole, but at least some idea of the distance and then the cost of running that pipe infrastructure and all, and then decide on, do we want to charge the individual homeowner on the connection between the main and the other?
Well, I think Suffolk County Water Authority has policy like that, right?
Well,
There's a connection charge.
Whatever we.
Well, yes, we could fund it.
We do whatever we want to
County
do.
could fund it, right.
Then we get down to like the district and how do you, all the things that go with it.
Stations Woods is the place to start.
That would be a logical place that was set aside originally.
For that.
For that
water.
purpose,
All
right.
Mobius, basically.
So if we are
That-
stopping contaminating water near Sachem's Woods, and we're beginning to plan a source there, you begin to now think about yes, Suffolk County Water Authority should be involved.
Why don't we just make an
And-
assumption?
Mhm.
Hold on, let's not get down
Go
to
for
that. This is an assumptive case, okay, to get some idea of what the cost would be to go from here to there, in essence. That would give you something to talk to people about with regards to, well, you have to run a pipe from your house to there, and the monthly charge might be whatever. But you would have two things. One, more than likely where the water is, first of all,
Right.
and Sachem's we can test that even, possibly,
right.
as a part of their request.
Although, yes, I think, knowing a cost makes some sense. My understanding about sort of the way that Suffolk County Water Authority works
Understand?
is that much of that they would view as like their own capital expenditure to be recouped over the course of many decades, and hookup fees as long as they have enough people to be hooked up and become ratepayers.
Understand, but whatever they do with that, all I'm coming up with is to avoid getting 40% of the people to sign up for the request and have us, as a Water Advisory Committee, request it of Suffolk County Water to get a swag on what it would cost to go from here to there.
Well, I would bring in Suffolk County Water Authority both to ask them what things would cost and also to ask them how they think the process would work, how they would
Sure,
see
we can
that
do all
process.
that,
Didn't we have some quotes when my B-bomb, when we went to Suffolk
did.
County years ago? I mean, that.
Yeah, there was
I
a
think
study that
we
was
have
on.
ideas.
That was from Montclair Colony to reach from Sachem's Woods area.
I don't recall which it was, because also, didn't we have?
It was an alternative water supply that was done in 2000 something.
That's not
And it
right.
had the piping, it had everything kind of laid out there.
Well, and there's a reference to
So
that.
Lots of studies, we do that, and I think shooting a request to Suffolk County right now, we should first take a look back and say, okay, we've got,
Some of which is referenced in the comprehensive plan chapters we need to just refresh on, because they do mention the
Okay, it's under studies, by
Yeah.
the way, in our SharePoint.
yeah, we've got plenty of studies.
Not gonna be
that have-
valid.
Quote's not
I was
good
looking at
anymore.
the price and I was like, wow, this would be great. So not
that.
It's a fraction of what it would really cost now.
That's what I-
But It's, yeah.
And it was a whole network they designed. Basically, I think it did include off island as an option, which really killed things.
Oh, yeah.
But it at least gave an idea of the network of pipes and things like that. And I don't know if they're operating.
Well, if I were in my former business, if I had were working for my former employer and you called me up with this problem, we would come in here, we would look at the topography, we would look at the water sources.
Right.
We would ask you whether you want fire protection or not, because that has a big effect
Big on
on
cost.
how you size the system and whether you have an elevated tank and all that.
Exactly.
And then you'd map out where your water sources are, how you're going to treat it, where your transmission mains are, where your distribution mains are.
Power.
And you'd lay all that out and you'd cost it. And you'd come up with probably something plus or minus 30%. Just almost.
Right off the bat.
That's fine. Yeah.
Almost doing it. It's spending a day or so driving around and the rest of
They
it's.
may have a model that could basically
Right.
plug in some of the data on a GIS.
So I think the question is, so that's fairly, that's easy, I wouldn't say it's easily done, but there's an established way to do that. I think the question is, what do we do first? Do we have a conversation with them and do we do something like that? And do we get a number that's plus or minus 30%? And do we work that through to annual rates and all of that? And then put that into the survey and basically find out, okay, you live in this identified triangle.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to pay X, whatever X is?
It's like creating a referendum
Yeah.
with some reference points.
I have no idea what X is.
That's what the county's doing for the countywide wastewater management district. So they figured out the number that everybody would have to pay, and that's what's going into the referendum. Would you be willing to pay $50 a year toward this program to have wastewater managed by the county?
Oh, that's on the.
So on the wastewater side of things. So you could do a very similar thing for the drinking water side of
It's
things.
interesting. I have people in Silver Beach, for instance, that would like to have public water right now. In fact, every day Luke Corbett comes around and says, how are you doing? I sure, are we going to have any public water down there yet? Because every time I get super high tides, my well gets salted. And all the people on that street
Yeah,
get salted, okay?
What street is that, Ken?
It's Upper Lulu, it's up the top of the cottage, and it goes back down to the beach where Peter Reach's house is at.
Oh, yeah.
I forget the name of that alley.
Yeah,
Whatever.
yeah, something way, I think it
Yeah,
is.
but anyhow, my other fear, like, and possibly a bigger one in some cases, is the fact that if we have a superstorm, we have so many people with their wells within 50 feet of the edge of the water in the Silver Beach area, which is very low.
yeah.
That's been salted with Sandy. I mean, basically, when that storm came through, there was a bunch of people that didn't have water for
You know,
weeks.
it actually strikes me that we probably would do well as we think about surveying for public water supply to think of a combination of the center and a near shore area like Silver
There's
Beach.
more money, I mean.
And to think about, in other words, there are two communities you'd want to know, to 40% of the people there, I think this might be a good idea for them.
Yeah, we have 265 residencies basically
In Silver Beach.
In Silver Beach.
And there's 500 here in the
And if you
center.
run down the perimeter of Silver Beach, basically count up the houses along the edge of the peninsula there, I don't know, you probably get 30% of that number, or something like that, with our expensive big homes along the water there.
So again, you know, obviously this whole thing, we're talking about a process that, you know, if we have to live a decade to see the result, but we, you know, or maybe 5 years to see it start going or something like that. But the starting point of it is community acceptance and really community demand. I want to have drinking water in my house. I would like to have drinking water in my
Yeah, I like
house.
to have it when the power goes out.
Yeah, so I think that we are talking about a combination of doing our homework in terms of process and cost, but an outreach process.
So here's another element of the outreach.
Uh-huh.
The person who's answering the survey
Mhm.
needs to understand what problem we're trying to solve,
Mhm.
which gets into taking what has been described to me as the anecdotal water quality information around what's going on inside this triangle
Mhm.
and putting some more specificity and quality around that description. And so that when you're answering the survey, you're going to say, okay, it's going to cost me X.
Mhm.
What am I getting for X? And presumably what you're getting for X is you're getting something that is of potable quality, whereas what you're now drinking isn't, if that's the case. But the other part of this is defining the problem.
Mhm. So I would like to see us, as we hone in on data, narrow our focus. You know, rather than 500 homes in the center triangle, I would like to see like the 50 or 100 homes that are most impacted. And I would
Well, you
like,
don't know that until you do a survey.
And people don't know what their numbers are.
And let's also,
Survey,
let's also be candid here, that people are not going to tell you that their water in the well is salted because it impacts the real estate value.
so
So you're talking about highly sensitive
Yeah.
information.
That's right.
we are.
So people are, number one, going to be, if they even reply, they're going to want to do so anonymously.
Reluctant, at least.
And if they reply at all. So to Andrew's point, I think that part of the packaging of something like this needs to have, besides I get potable water, the other environmental associated issues, put it into a context so that there's a clear, lucid rationale beyond just getting the potable water, so that it's a collective.
So, and putting that into a context, in other words, bringing
In
information
writing
to
so
these
that,
people.
so that they can absorb it
Mhm.
and you get cooperation. Otherwise,
Right. Well, I have a hard time seeing how you make a breakthrough here without like very, very directly beginning to talk to people.
well, that's face to face, isn't it?
It is face to face, I think. I think that's why I was saying like, I'd like to narrow the scope a little bit, but I feel like this starts to be.
I don't really
talk
want to
neighbors.
discuss this in this forum, but we are looking at something, the Silver Beach Association is looking at something like this, which was alluded to in my president's letter. But we're not really prepared to really discuss what we're considering, certainly in this forum.
Okay, all right.
So
There's another thing too.
we are giving thought to it.
Okay.
And I can say we have a draft of the questions that we want to ask.
Like a website survey type.
About water supply.
Well, specifically because we do have, as Ken just pointed out, many residents that have problems with salt.
Right.
That's right.
And I don't think it's going in the right direction. We don't know how many.
Right.
All we have is isolated anecdotal evidence, which is not enough to take it to a level. And maybe we don't need to do this now, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, we don't know.
But if you have to do it 5 or 10 years from now, you have to be talking about it now. So,
Well, the
Well,
issue you have
exactly.
is speed, because if in our case, in the Silver Beach case, it's a storm. It is a moment in time, and all of a sudden
Then you
your
get
life
hit and you're
changes,
out.
okay?
right.
And then it becomes, how long do I have to be able to get things back? And if you don't know where to take the water from, or how long the pipe is going to be, or anything like that, because when we did it, we'll talk to Suffolk County that time, there is a location in the Silver Beach area, for instance, that you could put a couple wells in because it's such a shallow aquifer between two bodies of water, in essence. I mean, it just doesn't have the pumping capability.
It's kind of like
imagine-
trying to place the effluent from the center,
Yes.
right? There's.
Yeah, but in that case, nobody wants it. In your case, everybody wants it.
Well, no, I'm saying where to get what Ken is saying, where to get the fresh water from.
Yeah.
But I assume that what's sensitive here is you're trying to figure out how to have a trusting
Well,
conversation.
exactly. I mean, as Ken said, I mean, we get, one-on-one conversations with people saying, gee, my water in my well is a problem, et cetera, et cetera. We also get sniping from neighbor to neighbor about people filling up their pools from a well.
Oh, it's a big issue.
Sure.
And I'll bet you a nickel, if you calculated the volume of all the pools on Shelter Island, match that against the water deliveries to Shelter Island, they would not match.
No,
Yeah.
there's rain.
Last year, most of the instances of salted wells or failed wells during the drought were tied to some overuse event, whether that be
Leak or
a leak, somebody was irrigating improperly, or filled their pool, and there was almost all of the reports that we got.
from the family.
But, conceptually, I'm with you, Doug, 100%. I don't think you'll get accurate responses from folks, and I don't think the burden should be for this committee or for the town to prove to somebody else that they need this or that their water's bad. Most of these folks already know what they're concerned. Rather, the offering should be, are you interested in this service? Here are the benefits that it can provide you. And you consider your own instance. Do you have poor quality water? Maybe that's of the highest priority.
Maybe you want to get it tested. Here's a strip to
Do you
figure out.
perhaps not trust your water supply for the long term, and you're interested in having a centralized system? Or do you have tenants and you want to simplify this, or are you worried about power outage? Whatever your interest in that water could be, then you would be interested in joining. I don't have, this argument of I haven't seen the data. I don't think that's the right approach. I don't want to prove to you that your water is bad and therefore you should you already know that, and you should make your own choice. Because the advantages of solving this infrastructure problem aren't just for one problem. They can solve different problems for different people. And to be fair, you don't have to have a problem and you can still be interested or not interested.
And there are different problems.
So this is important.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
you don't think we really need to rigorously define the problem in order to do the inquiry that Doug is talking about?
I think more importantly, you need to define what you're offering and what the benefits are. And most people, I believe, this is just my opinion, understand what their problem is, or they at least they know what their concerns are. Maybe they don't actually have that problem, but they're concerned about it. And if they knew what the opportunity was, then they can evaluate what.
They might even be more willing to look at their problem if they knew there was an opportunity to solve it. So
I don't think we have the resources or the capabilities to practically examine and convince all the community what their respective problems are. We don't fully understand them. We can't. There's too many variables and it's too big of a complex problem. But we can consolidate what the offering is.
right. Well, okay.
Could I just?
And we can do that.
I'm gonna
Go
wrap-
ahead, go ahead,
I'm
Ken.
gonna wrap one more point on this.
Yeah.
Very different problem to solve with a center versus
Yes.
salting. Okay, in one case, you have maybe a lot of reluctance and maybe an AI system over time will fix my problem. So I may be very reluctant to even talk about it to begin with, and maybe things will happen, lots of rain, and I'll be okay, or I'll buy water. Silver Beach or these low areas of Shelter Island, it's a little different thing. You have a storm coming in, and basically you basically get wiped out in essence. You lose your water supply.
You don't even have a
basically.
shower.
You basically,
Or a
it's gone, okay, from the standpoint of potability, because it's been salted, and you don't know how long it will take. Mine has not come back totally, okay, after like 6 years. So it's a very delicate process. I'm right at the edge of 500, I use a TDS or whatever, it's kind of a meter. So the other thing you have is a different economic situation in some of these cases, like in the Silver Beach area. And you have an investment that you'd like to protect. And you would like to be able to maybe get rid of you're already spending a lot of money because you have a lot of lousy water. You have iron, manganese, other nasty things that we need to have expensive, maintained devices. And they are the kind, many of them are salt-based. So that when you can't put an AI system in unless you put another cistern in addition to your AI system, because everyone has a salt-based iron removal system down there. So you have another motivating factor,
Absolutely.
to be able to do things.
So what, in both cases, though, what I'm hearing is that once we have, let's say, Suffolk County Water Authority come in,
It's
or
here.
anyone else who,
Yeah.
come speak to us, and
Right.
we kind of put together what the possible offering in Silver Beach, what the possible offering in the center might be.
True.
We then need to carry that offering in some fashion to select groups of homeowners in widening circles of, likely need.
Silver
And
Beach is
begin to
easy.
have them
Well,
saying, yes, if this option were available to me, yeah, I think I would consider it. Because that's exactly what drives it being delivered to them, is that they say they want it.
And many of the communities that are easier, like Silver Beach, we have a really well-done, well-run Silver Beach Association.
Right.
Basically.
Right, here in the center, it may be tougher in this,
We
that way.
don't have anything.
Right, so that's why I say it may be a door-to-door job. But putting together the offering and then, so.
I'm just suggesting that, the full picture includes systems to remove salt, to remove sodium chloride. There are systems to remove the nitrates, PFOs, all that stuff is in there. So it would be interesting to know, yes, I know I have a problem, but I have this system in, and to understand what people are doing with the treatment end rather than trying to pull it in from
Well,
someplace else.
that's right. Our survey contemplates supply, treatment, and disposal.
Okay.
What do you do?
We want to know.
Yeah.
And there's a real debate about, how invasive to make these questions.
Well, we had a survey done, as you know.
The systems that exist, have they been permitted, or you don't need a permit to install?
You don't need a
You don't
permit.
need a permit
Treatment system?
for water treatment.
For a home-based water
No,
treatment system?
you don't need a permit.
Okay.
I mean, it could be as simple as a water softener,
Right.
which is salt-based.
Yes, sure it is.
And, when it
Right.
clears itself out once a week, that stuff goes right back into the ground, which is not cool at all.
You could do.
Well, we capture it at the church.
Don't they have potassium chloride as well, not just sodium chloride?
I don't know.
They dump in sodium chloride.
Yeah, so it may be, that might be something to consider if people have a system and they're using salt for softening. They probably don't need to have water softening. We're not a particularly,
It's iron removal.
not a lot of limestone around here.
pH balancing.
It's mainly iron removal, manganese.
Yeah.
There's new stuff out that doesn't require salt, by the way. Doesn't require anything for about 5 years. Any catalytic material.
So that would be an interesting counterpoint to how do we get the water brought down here versus what are the systems that, if I.
Well, it doesn't touch salt.
I'm unfamiliar with
It doesn't touch the salt.
And there are systems that take nitrates out and they also do PFOs and, there's an annual cost to it, known.
You mean for each individual to do it themselves?
Everybody
have their own.
That would be interesting, the payback on drawing water from someplace else
Moving.
is years and years and years, or it's 2 weeks. What's the payback on that in
And
terms of
what's the
people putting
dimension of
systems
these
up?
water mains for these systems? How big are the pipes?
If it's fire service, 6 to 8 inch. If it's non-fire service, it's smaller.
We don't have fire service in the West Neck system.
Correct.
But there's fire service in the heights, right?
Fire service in the heights.
So that's.
We have an elevated tank.
Right, way back up on the hill.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are other hydrants around that are basically have a cistern.
Yeah.
So again, I'd like to continue to move forward with how we start to plan for the possibility of water supply for certain areas of Shelter Island. And that seems to, what we seem to be saying is that depends on what Joe was saying, knowing, how to offer that to people.
What about something simple like understanding where our sources are, which is our problem?
Suffolk County water.
Look at the old report it's probably 10 years old now.
Right, and in the end, Suffolk County Water Authority would do their own.
Well, but this was, who's it? They've done.
I haven't.
Yeah, they do. They have done a number of studies. It's the water. I mean, there's a complete study for the island.
I don't think it was validated on locations.
Oh, sorry.
The location of the source, I don't think was drilled or validated as to being a potential source. It's a good water there. I'm not
So
sure.
Andrew has a suggestion.
Our partner so far has been Suffolk County Water.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Why don't we have a conversation with them around the commercial terms, how they'd approach it? So for example, I'd like to know, does their 40% rule
Yeah.
on a new system, does it cover the CapEx of a new system?
Right,
It's a great question. Andrew.
Yeah.
Or because in the West Neck Bay situation, we only got onto their rates after we agreed to upgrade our system to their standards.
Right.
So we need to
We
understand
need to
this
understand
process
it.
of
So
doing.
we could, I'd be glad to get into a conversation with, I think his name was Joe.
Joe Picorni.
And Lisa's not here, so let's enlist her. Because she certainly knows Joe very well and is all over this.
And Joe would, of course,
And
be
discuss the.
Yeah, and just have a conversation with him.
Yeah, and
See where that goes.
I would like to have that conversation, and if the conversation seems at all promising, bring it to this committee.
Yeah, that's fine.
And develop what you would go to the community with, whether you do it in Silver Beach and the center, or just an area of the center, or just Silver Beach.
They can help determine that.
Right.
So that's right.
Or
Maybe it's
some
a
other-
matter of tactics, but
Uh-huh.
there will be people who will be skittish around centralized systems.
Of course.
And therefore, I think this endeavor really needs to be focused around public health. So there may be parts of the island where there is a significant public health issue. Sounds like we've been talking about 2 today. And so the
question for Suffolk County Water, and particularly Joe, who I believe is the VP of Development. So now this is what he does. How would you approach this from your perspective? How long does it take? Who pays the initial design costs to get to a point where you can actually sketch out the capital needs and translate that through to rates? How much of the capital expenditures do you actually fund under your own rate structure versus how much would the customers have to fund? All of that.
And ask him to share his financial model with us so that we can see.
And they're very clear about that stuff. They're very upfront about that stuff. So the end of that is you have an offering. Right? And then we're not foisting it upon anybody. We just want to see if you have a real offering and you have people who are anxious about their water in a certain area, what's their response to, here's an offering, would you be interested?
I think there's two sort of sides here, or two ends of the economic rainbow. On the one end of the economic rainbow, you're going to get pushback because people like the idea that we are limited in our density abilities because of water. So I think that this discussion should happen with some with some speed, because maybe we put in the comprehensive plan a suggestion or that should public water systems be expanded on Shelter Island, that is not to be taken by future town governments as a rationale to up your density to 20 units per acre. So that's just I just think that has to be part of the discussion. And now that we're in the last mile of comp plan, this is where we need to kind of, that we put that out to the people over the next few months and say, is this something you want to see, to have this kind of handcuff, if you will, on zoning? That's number one. My second one is on the other end of the economic spectrum, for people who really have trouble with a $6,000 hookup or whatever the number might be. I believe in my assessor's days, if you're in a water district, you can add the cost of hooking up. It's an option to your tax bill, and take it in an interest-free loan, so to speak, and pay over like a 10-year period. I have to refresh and find out.
That would be great, actually.
That if you could break down a payment for people to
the reasonable amount.
Yeah, that they could handle, that would really, so what I'm trying to say is there's fear on both ends for that spectrum. We should address that in this discussion as we go forward.
Very good point regarding being used against, high density. In essence, this has been the strategy for years.
Right. So let's put those fears to bed. The comp plan's a powerful tool.
Okay, I'll give you a second one. The second one is zoning. The current zoning law we have is dependent upon having a septic and a well on a 1 acre plot,
Yes.
having 150 feet between them.
I apologize.
If you have public
Let this
water,
go at the end, but.
you don't have a well. If you don't have a well, you could subdivide that 1 acre into 2 apartments like you would have it at the Jersey Shore. And that's the other major issue I get, was you want to trust these people here with that zoning law. And that is a biggie for people on the shore. In fact, I would say that was the original objection to public.
How to handcuff development is a topic that probably we won't be able to resolve in our 25 minutes of overtime here. So we'll table that for now. Right.
One second, 2005.
Yes.
The alternative study. You go into Shelter Island Studies in SharePoint and look for the 2005 Water Supply Alternatives Study.
Okay.
You get into your search argument and you will see what they put together in the way of a plan to bring water on the island and pipe it with numbers and all the other kind of things you want to have.
All right. So.
Okay, sorry.
No, not a problem, but we should probably, for everybody to be considerate, and I'm realizing I haven't been very considerate because we are now in a 2-hour meeting. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Yeah,
We got good conversation.
all right.
About